You've got a government, Boris Johnson and his cronies, that are threatening the population of the United Kingdom. We've got a responsibility for everybody to say, we need to stop this.
Westminster is desolate. MPs away whilst Parliament is on recess. They're not due to return until the House of Commons sits again in September. But a group of opposition leaders, the likes of Joe Swinson from the Liberal Democrats, Jeremy Corbyn from the Labour Party, Anna Soubry from the Independent Group for Change, and the SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, met today to discuss how they are going to challenge Boris Johnson when it comes to no-deal Brexit. They are convinced that it would be a bad outcome for the country, and today they agreed that a legislative approach was how they were going to do it. We sat down with Ian Blackford here outside the Houses of Parliament to find out what happened in that meeting. Ian Blackford, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure as always.
How was that meeting this morning? How were things between Jeremy Corbyn and Joe Swinson? Frosty?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, it's not been helpful to see the kind of spat that developed over the course of the last few days. Time is short. We are leaving the European Union on a no-deal basis unless we stop it. So today was an opportunity for all opposition leaders to come together, recognise that we had to work together, we had to show leadership, and I'm grateful to say that that was the case. We all coalesced around a plan. When we get back to Parliament, we're only going to get one chance. We need to take control of the agenda, so we need to take control of the agenda away from the government, and we've got to make sure, but not the government, that we bring forward legislation and we strike out no deal as the default option, because the simple fact is, if we do nothing, if we are unsuccessful, we're leaving the European Union on a no deal basis. All that means for the people of the United Kingdom, what it means for the economy, what it means for our rights as EU citizens, the rights to live, work and travel in 28 EU member states, that finishes in a few weeks' time. I'm not prepared to let that happen. So there's a responsibility that we all must work together. We will meet on a regular basis over the coming days and weeks. We are up for the fight against the right-wing Brexiteers, Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings, that are prepared to drive the bus off the cliff. We're not going to let that happen.
So what have you agreed then? What's the approach going to be?
Well, the approach is going to be this. We will take control of the ordered paper. We will work across the House, across all parties, and we'll bring forward legislation that will allow for an extension to Article 50. So we will remove the cliff edge of leaving Europe at the end of October.
Where are the votes for that coming from?
Across the SNP, the Labour Party, Lib Dems, Plaid Cymru, Green, but I have to say a number of Conservatives as well, that recognise that no deal is going to do untold damage. And you know, the thing for me, I've tried to rationalise this ever since we've had the Brexit vote, because the government knows there is no such thing as a good Brexit. The government knows that people are going to lose their job. The government's spoken about the potential for the supply of food and medicines to be impacted by this, for civil unrest to take place, for the peace process in Northern Ireland that we've all celebrated to be brought into question. You've got a government, Boris Johnson and his cronies, that are threatening the population of the United Kingdom. We've got a responsibility for everybody to say, we need to stop this.
That's your view, but it's not the view of a significant part of this country who actually now are starting to call for no deal. They would... OK, go on.
Well, look, the simple answer is, let's have a referendum. And let's put the proposition of no deal, because Boris Johnson is a Prime Minister. Who was he elected by? He was elected by Conservative Party members. He has no mandate for this. This isn't democracy. This is an affront to democracy, something which is going to put us back decades. And I want to have a referendum, and let's have that debate about remaining versus no deal. But let's have a debate about the principles of our rights as EU citizens, of the European Union that's delivered peace in a continent that faced 2 world wars. What are we doing? The world is not in a stable place at the moment. We need to have a strong European voice. We need to be part of that. But of course, I've got a responsibility to voters in Scotland. And I think it's becoming increasingly clear this place doesn't work for us. So Scotland has to become independent, and we want to have that opportunity to vote for independence in Scotland as well.
So Parliament voted to trigger Article 50. The logic of that position is that the UK leaves the EU regardless of whether or not a deal has been negotiated. Those same people that I just mentioned, I think they would say to you that the SNP's position is an affront to democracy because you are obstructing parliamentary sovereignty, not Boris Johnson.
You know, there's two things. One is that I don't think Parliament or parliamentarians thought this through when a number of them voted for Article 50. They were voting for a blind Brexit. They didn't know what they were going to get. The SNP opposed the Article 50 process. We voted against it. I am sent here by my constituents, and I'm the leader of the SNP at Westminster. Scotland overwhelmingly rejected Brexit. We voted 62% to remain, 38% for leave. We were told in our own referendum in 2014 if we stayed in the UK, we were to lead the UK, our voices would be respected, and that we would remain as European citizens. So I have a mandate from the people that sent me here to oppose Brexit. I am not prepared for my constituents to lose their job. But you know, fundamentally, we need freedom of movement. We're enriched by the ability that we have to go and live and work in Europe, but also by these EU citizens that have come and become part of our story, in our case, part of Scotland's story. I will fight tooth and nail to make sure we don't lose that.
I think the SNP's position here is abundantly clear. So is the Lib Dems, so is the Greens. There's a question mark over Labour. I want to ask you whether you think this meeting, which is about supposedly stopping no-deal Brexit, how much of that is just dressed up as opposition to Brexit in and of itself? Do you think there's common ground there between yourselves and the Labour Party?
I think the important thing is that we're all working together to stop no-deal. The Labour Party has got to sort its position out. It has its conference in a couple of weeks. I think it's clear that we've accepted our responsibilities as the SNP. We have shown leadership in Scotland. I'm now saying to the people of Scotland, we have a parliament that we can be proud of. We have chaos here. Let's finish the job in Scotland and become independent.
How many of the people around that table today would you say are prepared to accept Brexit in some form?
Look, they all have to speak for themselves. I would say the majority of the people around that table certainly don't want Brexit because, look, there is no such thing as a good Brexit. If you look at the government's economic analysis, look at the Bank of England, the IMF, every single piece of analysis from those respected institutions says that we're going to be worse off. What politician, on the basis of ideology, wants to make their constituents worse off? It's madness.
Down the road, though, if we're potentially looking at a unity government being formed, that might be the compromise that the SNP has to make.
Well, look, at the end of the day, I want to see the people in the UK given the opportunity to have a vote as to whether or not they wish to stay in the European Union, but I also want the people of Scotland to have a say in their own future as well. That is right, that is democracy. These two things should happen.
That's my question to you then. At what point does the SNP stop fighting Brexit or even accept a softer form and move on and start severing ties with England?
We are European. We are European citizens. We are not prepared to give that up. It is right that the people of Scotland have that opportunity to have a say in their future. That day is very close at hand. Opinion polls show there's a majority support for a referendum, and of course the SNP government was elected in 2016 on a mandate. If there was a change of circumstances, we should call a referendum. Now, other people and other parties are entitled to oppose Scottish independence. What they can't do is oppose the right of people of Scotland to have a say in their future.
Close at hand is abstract, though. Can you give me any more indication of when you think this will happen?
Well, there's legislation going through the Scottish Parliament that will allow for a referendum to take place. This really needs to happen sooner rather than later.
Ian Blackford, thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure as always.